So how does a tiny island, really just a speck on the map with zero natural resources, become one of the wealthiest places on the entire planet? Well, that's the absolutely incredible story of Singapore. It's a nation that has, time and time again, just defied all the odds. So, let's dive right into this amazing journey.
I mean, just look at modern Singapore. It's an absolute economic titan. If you look at its GDP per person, basically how much wealth is generated for every single citizen, it's the 7th highest in the world. That's just a mind-boggling level of economic success.
And you know what? It's not just about the money. Not at all. Singapore also ranks 9th on the UN's Human Development Index. Now, this measures stuff that really matters, right? Things like health, education, and your overall standard of living. It just goes to show you that the quality of life there is exceptionally high. Which, of course, brings us back to that huge question. How on earth did a place with basically nothing to start with build all of this? To figure that out, well, we've got to go back to the very beginning.
Okay, so let's start with Chapter 1, the Imperial Trading Post. This is all about how the foundations for Singapore's future fortune were laid.
And what's really interesting is that this island's importance didn't just pop up out of nowhere with the British. Way back in the 14th century, it was already a pretty big deal. It was known as Temasek, which means sea town, and it was this key trading post that two massive empires, the Siamese and the Majapahit, were constantly fighting over. So it was strategic from the get-go.
All right, so the modern story really kicks into gear in 1819. This guy, Sir Stamford Raffles, shows up, takes one look at the island's potential, and establishes a British trading post. And let me tell you, this was no random guess. It was an absolute masterstroke of strategy. From there, things moved fast. By 1824, it was officially under the British East India Company, and eventually, by 1867, it became a full-blown crown colony, meaning London was calling the shots directly.
So you might be asking, why did it just explode in popularity? Well, it was like the perfect storm. First, you have the location. It's perfectly placed. Second, it has this amazing natural deepwater harbor. But the real game changer, the secret sauce, was that Raffles made it a free port. That meant no taxes. Imagine you're a trader back then. You could either pay a ton of money in tariffs at the Dutch ports, or you could sail to Singapore and pay nothing. It was a no-brainer. And then boom, 1869, the Suez Canal opens, and what was a steady stream of ships turns into an absolute flood. And all this business, all this success, meant people started pouring in from all over. The population just skyrocketed. By 1871, it's pretty incredible, but migrants from China already made up over half the people on the island. This massive shift basically set the stage for the Singapore we know today. But all this growth and prosperity was about to come to a very abrupt and brutal halt.
Which brings us to our next chapter, War and the Road to Merdeka. And yeah, this was absolutely a trial by fire.
You see, the British were incredibly confident about Singapore. They'd built this massive naval base there, and they thought it was completely unbeatable. Winston Churchill himself called it the Gibraltar of the East. You know, Gibraltar, that big rock fortress in Europe? That's how they saw it, an unshakable symbol of their power in Asia. Well, that symbol of power? It was completely shattered. And not in years or even months. It fell to the Japanese in just 55 days. It was a lightning-fast campaign during World War II that was just shocking. In that surrender, it was the single largest defeat in the history of the British military. Just devastating.
And what came next was 3.5 years of absolute hell. The island was renamed Shionen-to, and the people lived in terror of the Japanese military police, the Kempeitai. The suffering was widespread, but the Chinese community was targeted with particular brutality in something called the Sukching Massacre, where thousands upon thousands of civilians who were just thought to be anti-Japanese were rounded up and executed. It was a horrific time.
Now, here's the key takeaway from all this tragedy. The fact that the British, these supposedly invincible rulers, couldn't protect them, that completely destroyed their credibility. The illusion was shattered. So after the war, everything changed. A new fire was lit, and people started demanding self-rule. They started demanding merdeka, which is the Malay word for independence.
But independence didn't happen right away. First, there was this very rocky detour, the tumultuous Malaysian Union. And honestly, it was an alliance that was probably doomed from the start. So why even do it? Why merge with Malaya? Well, you have to put yourself in their shoes.
Leaders like Lee Kuan Yew looked around and saw a tiny island with no resources and a tiny market. Their entire economy was tangled up with the mainland. For them, merging to create Malaya wasn't just a good idea. It felt like the only way to survive.
The problem was they had completely different visions for what this new country should be. Singapore's leaders pushed for a Malaysian Malaysia, equal treatment for everyone, regardless of race. But the federal government in Kuala Lumpur had a totally different system, one based on giving special privileges to the ethnic Malaya majority. You had this fundamental clash of ideas, plus a ton of economic anxiety on both sides, and it just created non-stop conflict.
And that conflict, it got so bad that after only 2 years filled with political fighting and even deadly race riots, Singapore was kicked out. I mean, literally expelled from the Federation. On August 9, 1965, a visibly emotional Lee Kuan Yew went on television to announce it. You could just feel his pain. This wasn't the independence he had fought for, it was an independence that was forced upon them.
And just like that, Singapore was alone. This next part is the most critical chapter of all, forging a global powerhouse. This is where they wrote the blueprint for survival.
And trust me, the situation was bleak. Let's just list the problems, okay? No natural resources, not even enough water. Sky-high unemployment, we're talking 10 to 12%. Hostile neighbors, with Indonesia literally in the middle of a military confrontation against them, and on top of all that, a very real fear that Malaysia might just decide to take them back by force. Nobody, and I mean nobody, thought they were going to make it.
But Singapore's leaders had a plan, a playbook for survival. It was incredibly pragmatic. Step 1, get money in. They rolled out the red carpet for foreign companies, building huge industrial parks and offering amazing tax deals. The goal was simple: make Singapore the best place in the world for big corporations to set up shop. Step 2, house the people. They tackled a huge squatter crisis by building massive public housing towers. And this was genius, because it wasn't just about giving people a roof over their heads, it gave them a real stake in the country's success. Step 3, defend yourself. They built a modern army from nothing, with mandatory military service for all young men. They weren't going to get pushed around again. And finally, step 4, build a smart workforce. They completely overhauled the education system to focus on practical skills and made English the language of business, creating the perfect workers for the global economy they were building.
And the craziest part? It worked. And it worked fast. Just look at this progression. By the 1970s, believe it or not, Singapore was the third largest oil refining center in the entire world. Then in the 80s, they leveled up, moving into high-tech stuff like making computer chips, and by the 90s, they had a world-famous airport and seaport and had become this major global hub for travel, for money, for everything. It's just an incredible transformation.
So, that incredible journey brings us pretty much to today, and to Singapore's next chapter. What lies ahead?
Well, today, the nation is known for its stability. It's now being led by its fourth generation of leaders, who are carrying on that legacy of really careful, long-term planning. It's a core part of how the country is run. So that leaves us with this one big, fascinating question to think about. I mean, they pulled off one of the greatest success stories of the entire 20th century. But now, in the 21st century, with a whole new set of global challenges, what's going to be their next chapter? What will define Singapore from here on out?
Hey, if you enjoyed getting this quick history of Singapore, we've got a whole playlist of them called Quick Country Histories that you should definitely check out. And of course, for more explainers just like this one, make sure you hit that subscribe button for notebook summaries. Thanks so much for watching.